Good evening everyone, at 6 p.m. and I declare this ordinary council meeting open. I welcome everyone in the chambers and anyone watching online. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters, their community and culture. We pay respects to their elders past, present and their descendants. Item 2 is the disclaimer. The terms of condition of entry into this meeting are posted at the door as you enter. Please ensure you have read them prior to entering the meeting and abide by them. Item 3, apologies and attendances. All councillors are present and the only person who's not here is our CEO, Mr. Kane. He is on leave overseas. Item 4, declarations of financial proximity interest or interest affecting impartiality. And under Part 4.13 of the City's election caretaker provision, our policy states, for the purpose of transparency and the benefit of the public gallery, candidates are requested to identify themselves as an election candidate prior to ask questions or making a statement at any briefing session, agenda forum, council meeting or committee meeting. The following persons have nominated as candidates for the forthcoming local government election. Councillor Bowman for Mayor, Councillor Congdon as a candidate for the Whiteman Ward, Councillor Henderson as a candidate for Mayor and the Swan Valley Gidgegannup Ward, Councillor Johnson as a candidate for Mayor in the Midland Guildford Ward, Councillor McCulloch as a candidate for Mayor and the Pearce Ward, Councillor Prodovnik as a councillor for Mayor in the Midland Guildford Ward, Councillor Richardson as a candidate for Mayor in the Pearce Ward, Councillor Singh for Mayor and Councillor Zanino for Mayor, and Mr. Gary Wepner, candidate for the Pearce Ward. I acknowledge this and take it to apply to the entirety of this meeting, and the relevant candidates I've just mentioned will not be required to identify their candidacy each time they address the meeting. If there's any candidates in the gallery that wish to speak, I'd ask that you also advise us of your name and what position you're applying for if that occurs. I'll now ask, are there any other declarations for financial proximity or interest in affecting impartialities from staff or councillors? No others, thank you. That takes us to item 5, public question. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I've just handed in a declaration of interest, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's just been handed to me. So it's a disclosure of interest. It's in relation to item 4.1. It's an impartiality interest, and the reason is Councillor Johnson said he founded the Save the Guildford Hotel Action Group. Thank you. That can be noted and will be recorded in the minutes. Public question time. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996. Questions and answers marked with an asterisk have been amended either for the purpose of summarising, that is, removing preambles, statements, or for editing purposes. All questions received have been answered and provided to that person that submitted the questions, and all answers will be published in the minutes of this meeting. I'll advise everyone now that we do have public question time a bit later on. And could I ask, have an indication by show of hands of how many people in the gallery would like to ask questions tonight? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, perhaps 8. Okay, thank you. Just that we've got a limited time for public question time. I want to make sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to ask their questions. Item 5.1, answers to questions which were taken on notice. There were 5 questions asked by Mr. Gary Wepner, and those 5 questions have been answered. There's also an additional question on behalf of the West Bullsbrook residents, and that has also been answered. 5.2, questions relating to reports contained in the agenda, and 5.2.1, there are no questions of which due notice was given. 5.2.2, questions without due notice, and following people have registered to ask questions on matters not related to the agenda. I think that should be regarding the agenda. And the first one is regarding item 4.1, Responsible Authority Report. It's on the extension of the Vaudeville Theatre, the Guildford Hotel on James Street, Guildford. And Mrs. Christine Hughes, you're the first person. Thank you, Christine. If you can ask your questions, and if we can, we'll answer them tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it? Oh no, it's now turned on. Thank you. Look, I appreciate that the Town Planning Office Senior Planner may not be the author of the report, but that's the person to whom I direct the questions. The first question is that in the report to Council tonight, you refer to initial discussions with the applicant leaving the city to understand that this application was for space and not additional patronage. I'm wondering, which ultimately came to 570 additional patrons. Can you explain whether or not that was obscured by the applicant, or did planning staff simply not ask? How did it come about?
Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully the report makes plain that the confusion or lack of clarity was from the applicant. The city did ask, subsequent to the application being referred, and the narrative outlines that the city had to chase up to get clarity as to whether or not there was any additional patrons or not.
All right, well, thank you for that. On the 30th of May, according to the report, the City of Swan expressly asked the applicant about anticipated patronage, and I presume that something twigged staff, probably the traffic report, that indeed increased patronage was on the cards. But before getting, my question is why, before getting a response to that on the 30th of May, did you proceed to public consultation on the 3rd of June without the answer to that question?
Through Mr. Mayor, with these applications to the JDAP, time is precious. We knew this had to go to council, and we basically have to progress an application that would normally take 80 days to report on within 50 days. So we had to advance the advertising of the application, and then throughout that process, and noting the submissions that people have made understandably, thinking, okay, there must be additional patronage, we clarified that. It is unfortunate but true to say the applicant has chopped and changed in the position, and that is clear in the report.
All right, well, that leads to my next question then. Why, 10 days into the 21-day public comment period, when you received a response from the applicant that indeed the applicant was talking about 570 additional patrons from a position of non-disclosure of any, why didn't you either pull the application or amend what was on the city's website to disclose that to people who still had another 12 days to make a submission? Because that information didn't come to light on the public notice board.
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, I agree it is unfortunate, but I'll say again without belabouring the point, the city had to chase up multiple occasions from contradictory positions by the applicant. So, and the narrative is in the report, no additional patrons, yes, additional patrons, a number, a revised number, and then back to no additional patrons. So yes, I accept that it has been perhaps been unclear to members of the public, but to be fair, Mr. Mayor, it has also through that process been unclear to staff.
All right, well, if it generated 44 opposition on no additional patronage, we might be going forward to JDAP with 400 had they known. My third question is, has the applicant ever actually amended the application to reflect originally 570, then 200, and now the position, the negotiated position of 0? Has the application been amended to reflect that, the application which will go forward to JDAP?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, it doesn't, because the original application as lodged didn't make any reference to patron numbers, and now there is no extra patron numbers, so the application as it's submitted is correct and doesn't require amendment.
That might not be the case, but all right, my fourth question, the officer's recommendation to support the application subject to a cap of 0 on patrons, is that an enforceable condition, and to whom will the cost and the burden fall?
Through Mr. Mayor, precisely, it's not a cap of 0, it is a condition capping the total aggregate number of patrons across the two premises to 729. That will bind the two owners of the property, who will both need to comply with such conditions if it's imposed on an approval.
Can I just ask, thanks, Christine, I've got that down as 5 questions. And
Sorry, no. Well, I apologise.
Well, you might have asked a number of questions or carried on from
well,
it.
then my final question
Thank you.
is, sorry to interrupt you, sorry. Due to the shortcomings in the applicant's traffic survey, the City commissioned its own. Who's going to pay for that? We ratepayers or will the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
We've paid for already, Mr Mayor. It's not to suggest that there were shortcomings in the applicant's traffic assessment, it's just to verify what they claim.
Thank you. There are also 5 questions asked by Andrea Biondi, and those 5 questions have been answered. Mr Tim Howling asked 5 questions, and they've also been answered and will appear in the minutes of the meeting. Mr Arnold Whiteside, Chairperson of Friends of the Guildford Historical Precinct, your 4 questions have also been answered. And now I'll ask, is there any other members in the public gallery wishing to ask a question on an item on the agenda? If you can please come to the podium, state your name and ask your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My name's Tim Howling and I act for and on behalf of the Friends of the Guildford Historic Precinct. My questions are as follows. The minutes of the 30th of November 2011 record that the estimated cost for the development of the redevelopment of the Guildford Hotel was $7.98 million. The minutes record that Christine Hughes had provided advice that it would be beyond jurisdiction to, in fact, carry out an approval or grant an approval for a development which was required to go to the JDAP. It is now suggested that the development costs was only $5 million. Where does the amount of $5 million come from when the minutes firmly on the 30th of November 2011 records that the estimated cost of the redevelopment was $7.98 million, which would have as a result that the approval of the Guildford Hotel was beyond jurisdiction of this council?
Thank you. I'll have to refer to the planning staff if you can provide an answer.
Thank you,
or
Mr
take it on
Mayor.
notice.
That is plainly false. The estimated cost of development of the application as originally submitted on the Form 1 was $5 million. The minutes merely refer to a contested claim by Ms Hughes that the value was greater than that which was rejected.
Thank you. Another question, Mr Howling?
Secondly, and may I say, I don't appreciate with just saying it's false, but the second point that I wish to say is that in respect of the limits of the numbers who are going to attend at the premises to 700 persons, is it accepted that the 700 persons is taken from the requirements in respect of a public building class 20 and therefore has no application to matters of development?
Through Mr Mayor, the 729 cap is imposed or recommended to be imposed as a condition of planning approval.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's not an answer. I asked whether it came from the class 20 building.
If you can elaborate, Mr Russell, if not, you'll have to take it on notice, I think.
I'll take it on notice, Mr Mayor.
Thirdly, is Council aware that the 2011 development was not in fact carried out to its full, so that the area of that development was not the subject of completion? And what actions, therefore, are being taken to ensure compliance with the original approvals, both in terms of the extent of the parking and the nature and extent of the development, which was the subject of the 2011 approval?
Mr Russell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The development has been substantially commenced and there is no evidence in front of the city to suggest that the owners of the Guildford Hotel are in any way in breach with any of the conditions of their approval.
Does council accept that the development as approved in 2011 extended to the lot which is presently the subject of limestone covering, where a development was intended to be carried out, and so additionally, for that reason, the only way within which the responsible officer's report has approached this development is to consider that that the theatre addition is simply a variation to the 2011 approval, as opposed to a entirely new application for development approval over both the Guildford Hotel and the theatre site.
Through Mr Mayor, that is incorrect, because this application includes the Vaudeville Theatre site, which was never the subject of the original approval and can't be a modification to it.
Mr Mayor, with the greatest of respect, the question is not understood. The application, as I understand, is for both Lot 2, the owners of Lot 2, the theatre site, and Lot 18, the Guildford Hotel. And this is the question, does the council accept that the approach taken is to pick up the 2011 approval and then approach the approval process of adding the theatre as if it were simply an amendment, as opposed to looking at the whole development proposal afresh in exercising the discretion? That was the question.
Through Mr
Russell.
Mayor, I think I understood the question. I think I've answered it correctly. This is not an amendment to the original Guildford Hotel approval. This is a new application that happens to be for both the properties. I can't be any clearer than that, Mr Mayor.
In respect of clause 5.5 of the scheme B, that is requiring that the council has regard to the expressed views of residents surrounding, many of whom are sitting behind me, is it accepted that there was a failure by the responsible officers to, as required by the scheme, have regard to their expressed views before making a determination of a recommendation to approve the addition of the theatre to the original Guildford Hotel?
Mr Russell?
Mr Mayor, the report before the councillors and the public runs to some 23 pages and expresses a clear articulation or articulated response to all of the submissions. So I plainly reject any notion, Mr Mayor, in those 23 pages that the submissions made by members of the public, including members of the business community in Guildford along James Street, are not clearly addressed. It's patently false, Mr Mayor.
Never spoke to me. Rubbish.
Thank you. I'll ask if there's another member of the gallery who'd like to come forward and ask their questions. Thank you. Gentleman in the front row, if you could state your name and you can ask 5 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Arnold Whiteside, I'm the chair of the Friends of Guildford Historical Precinct. Look, listening to the questions and the answers given, and I thank Kathy for sending through quickly the answers to my questions this afternoon. And all these things seem to revolve around numbers, and the number of patrons allowed on site at the moment being 729, and the fact that there's 42 car spaces to cater for all those people. And I'm assuming, I don't know if the 729 includes all the employees on site, etc., but park that. I'm just wondering, has the council or who's responsible for actually checking that the venue operators don't ever exceed the 729? I mean, have we got evidence that at the moment they're only pulling 400, so they've got capacity? I mean, I'm a business person. You only spend money and do things, increase stuff to increase turnover. And in this type of business, that comes from extra foot traffic. So does council, who's responsible for checking that they are complying with the current maximum patronage?
Thank you, Mr Russell.
That's my only question, Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In essence, the city, through the planning approval, can check on compliance that they don't have more in aggregate than 729 across the 2 properties. In any event, the Guildford Hotel is capped at 729. At any point in time, city staff may access the premises for the purpose of doing a count of patron numbers. licensed premises, as you would know, Mr Mayor, routinely have front of door security that have what's colloquially known as a clicker. The click heads in and heads out to ensure that they comply, not least of which with building regulations, but critically also capped amounts under liquor licensing. And the penalties for breaches of liquor licensing in this state, as council is probably aware, are quite extensive. So it's readily done, it's a common day occurrence, and it can be easily implemented.
Thank you. We've had 15 minutes of public question time. I'm happy to allow another 10, and I'll review that once we've had more questions. So if you could please come to the podium, state your name and
Yes,
ask
thank
your
you,
questions.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Andra Biondi from Cornerstone Town Planning, representing the Friends of the Guildford Historical Precinct. Thank you for answering some of my questions. I will respectfully say that some of these questions were not responded to properly, so I wanted to give the organisation an opportunity to respond properly. Through the chair, could you please answer how this development addresses the deemed provisions, specifically clause 67, subclause 2, which talks about there are 3 distinct matters here that I think need to be addressed, and these are the context and character of the locality and how this development will fit in within the existing area, how the development will adequately address car parking, entry, exiting, which is already occurring in a non-compliant manner with the fact that there are cars parking on land that has sand. And thirdly, the arrangements for bus manoeuvring in and out of the hotel, which is already, my understanding, is already a problematic process that's occurring there.
Okay, did you understand all those? Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to be very short and sharp on this for the sake of the progression of the meeting. The answers have been provided to the questions, and the full address of these matters is amply contained at length with clarity in the 23 pages of the staff report, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll ask if you've got another... I'm not going to get into a debate whether you agree or disagree with the answer. If you have another question, I'd like you to ask it. Thank you.
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. I have a couple more questions, please. Thank you. Through the chair, I would like to just understand why there are no conditions recommended on the officer's recommendation for some sort of reciprocal car parking arrangement between the 2 properties. I know that development approvals run with the land. However, the arrangement hasn't been formalised or established. It's not simply good enough to just say, oh, it will just be an arrangement it's through the development approval. Well, it's not, because you haven't actually conditioned it. So could you please explain why? Thank you.
Thank you. When you're ready, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Without repeating myself to say that's all articulated in the report, the simple fact is that there is no net increase in patron numbers. In any event, because the approval applies to both properties and the condition will apply to both properties, the 729 can be shared between the 2 businesses, or actually they're going to be 1 business, the 2 premises, in any way that suits the 2 premises. So city staff did not consider it necessary, given the imposition of that capped condition across the 2 properties, to have any more detail around one owner entering into a negotiation for reciprocal access to the other. That does not mean, though, Mr Mayor, that if the council thinks that that is belt and braces and appropriate, it is more than welcome and it's entirely suitable, if it sees fit, to impose such a condition.
Thank you. If you have another question.
I'll make one final question. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Just on the reciprocal car parking arrangements, that is to do with land. It is not to do with patron numbers. So I just wanted to clarify that. They're 2 very distinct and different things. And could you please explain to me how that is orderly and proper planning with your previous response?
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr Russell. I'll ask another member of the gallery wishing to ask a question to please come to the podium. No other questions?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just following on from my question, if I may, just one question.
Well, you only asked one question, so you're entitled to come back. I've extended it for another 6 minutes, so
No.
if you have a question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on that, that it is the council's responsibility for office to attend sites that have patronage limits. When was the last time that actual check took place on the Guildford Hotel as it is now? Could that please be stated?
Mr Russell, if
I'd
you
have
know.
to take that on notice, Mr Mayor. It would be a building regulation matter.
Thank you. We can't provide you with an accurate answer tonight, but
Yeah,
we
but
will
you
get
will.
back to you.
That's
and
all
the
I can
answer will be
ask.
recorded in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
No, thank you. I'll ask once more, are any other members of the public? Gentleman with his hand up. And this is on an item on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, please come forward, state your name and ask your questions.
Oliver Rickson, it's just to do with the parking. I'm was a chef at the Guildford Hotel, and we get a lot of Uber drop-offs, obviously, but it's a lot of food revenue, and that was always a complaint for delivery drivers, where to park, where not to park, and they were parking along the curbs on Johnson Street and along James Street as well. I live in Guildford, so a lot of people had traffic issues with that, and that's not addressed in any parking spaces. Sure, has been strangely addressed and not enough, but for the turnover of the delivery industry,
Okay, thank you for that. I
been
don't know
taken
you-
into consideration.
I don't know if it's more of a statement than a question, but if that can be taken into consideration by council as well. Last call, any other members of the gallery wish to ask a question that relates to items on the agenda? I can see a hand go up, I can't see a body. If they can come forward to the podium, please.
Yeah, I'm just asking firstly, is the Guildford Hotel debacle basically, is that sort of settled for the moment? Because we've got a different matter.
Now, any item that's on tonight's agenda,
Yeah,
you can come forward and ask a question, and a little bit later there'll be questions that don't
just got
relate to the agenda.
The one question really, it was really just regards my questions. I sort of,
I could just ask you to state your name so we have it
oh
recorded.
yeah, my name is Neil Roberts, ratepayer, Swan. And it was in regards, obviously, we're here regarding the surveillance cameras basically just growing in number. The answers given were that we're up to something like 570 odd surveillance cameras already in our town area. And the first question that I'd sort of put forward really sort of related to the Riot Act, really as regards the Crimes Act and obviously serious investigation. But the answer that we were given was why the onslaught of surveillance cameras is regarding various action regulations which give local governments the power to investigate matters upon receiving a complaint, for example, under the Food Act and the Dog Act. We were really looking for an answer that related to authority in maritime law and basically legal standing and authority in law as to why this continues to basically be an onslaught to the people of our town. So the response I was given really is lacking in substance because we were more in line with statute and authority. We were looking for a statute and
You're more
authority.
talking about the fact that the city currently has 580 CCTV cameras.
That's correct, yes.
Well, I think I can answer that. Is because we get numerous requests from many members of our community that they don't feel safe. They want the city to put these CCTV cameras in, but most of those are within inside buildings or protecting the city's assets. So if there is an incident of damage, vandalism, etc., we can provide the correct authorities, being WA Police, with footage. Yep. And as I say, this comes about as a result of direct requests from our residents.
I understand concerns, but it was really starting off our dialogue by finding out where the authority in law was for this continuation, basically in numbers going out into the public domain, we really feel that people saying that they don't feel safe is insufficient to continue this action of surveillance on the people.
All our cameras are either in private buildings, which are the city assets, or in public places, so anyone could film or see what a person in the
Yeah,
public area is doing.
it's generalising
Roberts.
again, really, basically the problem by virtue that we're not opposed to obviously someone protecting their personal property, but at the same time there is basically laws of privacy in the public domain, and it's there where we're basically asking for the authority.
I'll say again, Mr. Roberts, all of the city's cameras are either inside city buildings or on the outside of city buildings where public have got access to, and normally there's no offence for that. We don't put cameras so we can watch inside people's premises, and as I said, that's a direct request of our residents.
Very good. So that pertains to cameras that are starting to be placed in town streets, in
Yes.
suburban streets.
Absolutely.
Yep. Very good. We'll continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask again, yes, the lady, if you come forward, state your name and ask your question. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gina Bloom. Now, I'm a resident of Bellevue. I'd just like to continue on to a question following on from Mr. Roberts. Mr. Mayor, you just stated that the request has come from residents who feel unsafe in the area. Can you please explain to me why a camera has recently been placed on Catherine Street in Bellevue, where there are no residential properties on that part of Catherine Street, and I can assure you the residents in Bellevue feel safe. Please explain to me why that camera has appeared there, and consequently from that camera we now are getting multi-novas setting up along Catherine Street. This is not for the safety of the people.
Multi-novas have got nothing to do with the City of Swan. That's the state police traffic issue.
But it is a direct result from the camera being placed there.
I'll have to refer to Mr. Bishop. The only thing I can think of would be perhaps illegal dumping and as a direct request. But Mr. Bishop, are you aware of the situation of the city's CCTV on Catherine Street in Bellevue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I'm not. I'll have to take it on notice to check that one out specifically, but I would like to, if it's okay, just try and answer the previous questioners, Mr. Roberts' question and part of what's been raised here. Firstly, the primary piece of legislation that we operate under to protect privacy is the Surveillance Devices Act in WA. That's the main piece of legislation we operate under. As you've already stated, Mr. Mayor, the vast majority of cameras are to protect city assets and city staff. The city does use some cameras in public places, but they are strictly managed under the Surveillance Devices Act, so they don't cover private properties and things of that nature. And the other thing is, with regards to this camera in Bellevue, it sounds most likely it would be a different authority. There are a number of government agencies that do use cameras. We are aware that the police, for instance, are putting out more speed cameras and at fixed locations as well. But certainly with regards to that particular location, I can take it on notice and find out exactly which authority has put that camera out.
I'd just like to assure you, Mr. Mayor, there is no dumping of rubbish in that area. I travel that area at least 2 or 3 times, if not 4 times a day, every day of the week. There is no illegal dumping of rubbish there.
As I say, that would be one reason if it was the city's camera, but I'm not sure if it is, but we'll find out and get back to you.
Okay, so I will refer back to one of the questions that I had submitted prior to the meeting. Who is responsible for providing the surveillance cameras and were they vetted? My response was Blue Force Proprietary Limited met the city's requirements of the tender, which included reference checks, qualitative reviews and licence requirements. So further on from that question, what was the qualitative criteria for that tender?
Mr. Bishop or Mr. Coaten?
No, I'd have to take that on notice.
Right. I should have added to that question. Do the operators undertaking the surveillance, do they have a baseline security clearance? Not a National Police clearance? And do they also have a working with children's clearance? Because bear in mind, CCTVs also monitor children. So in that respect, a working with children at an absolute minimum would be acceptable. Nothing less than that, and a baseline security clearance.
Thank you. I think we'll take those questions on notice and we'll provide the answers to you when we have them.
Okay, right. So my further questions are in relation to the 5G towers. Now, I know or I understand that the process is for a submission to be put through the council for the towers. However, we would like the city to provide us with a map of all 5G towers within its boundaries, and the map to note who owns the asset, when the asset was first established, and the approvals given at the time of establishment and subsequent approvals for any upgrades. And how is the radiation measured from these towers?
I'll have to take all those questions on notice, I'm afraid, Ms Bloom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? The gentleman has just raised his hand. If you come forward. We now have 5 minutes left before I can't take any more questions from the public. So if you can ask your questions, we'll try and get them answered here.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Stefan Arlander, I run a business in Guildford. Back to the Guildford Hotel application then. There is, as I understand it, a joint application for the area. What happens when the two parties split, and how does that affect the development when finished? And the third question at the same time, how does this development further the Guildford historical precinct?
Did you understand the questions, Mr Russell?
Mr Mayor, thank you. In relation to the first question, which was what happens with this application if there is a split, the owners of Lot 2, the Vaudeville Theatre, for example, no longer lease the Guildford Hotel, or very simply, the conditions which bind both properties remain irrespective of who owns what and what the relationship is between the two. Obviously, if there is a split between the operator of the Guildford Hotel and the Vaudeville, then this condition may well be unworkable for the both of them, and they would then need to apply to modify it, which would be contemplating a net increase in parking, which would have us under that application revisit the whole issue of parking as alluded to in the report. So that would take care of that issue, Mr Mayor. In relation to the second question, how does this further the heritage values or conservation values of Guildford? Again, without banging on about it, the 23 pages of the report go to great pains to make it clear that the Department for Planning, Lands and Heritage accepts that this won't have any adverse income to the won't have any adverse impact on the heritage values of Guildford as a state registered heritage town. And the city's heritage consultant also affirms that the application will not have any adverse impact. In point of fact, it's actually an enhancement, which is what has been responded to in one of the questions. So that's, in short, Mr Mayor, the disposition of this application in relation to the heritage values of Guildford.
Thank you.
So a mega pub site, that's going to enhance
Well,
the heritage.
I think the question's
Guildford.
been answered, sir.
Yeah.
I'll ask once more. Any other questions from members of the gallery? Thank you. If you come forward, and I'll remind you, you have 2 minutes left of public question time before I have to move on to the next items in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My name's Marty Wenham. My question relates to public housing. In recent times, a substantial amount of public housing has been sold off within the Shire. Can the city provide us with the increase in homelessness within the Shire resulting from the sell-off of public assets?
Thanks, Mr. Wenham. I don't think there's an item on our agenda about that tonight, but I'll take it on notice and we'll get a reply to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's time for one last question. Anyone else? Then we'll be moving on to item 5.3, other questions, and 5.3. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I said I could take one more question. No one raised their hand. I've now moved on. And under our meeting procedures law, I can extend public question time twice. And just before you move a dissent motion, Councillor Johnson, reading from 4.2, item 5, the presiding member may rule or council may resolve to extend public question time in 10-minute increasements, but may not extend public question time more than twice at the same meeting. I've already extended it twice by 10 minutes and we're out of public question time. So 5.3.1, questions of which due notice have been given. Mr Gary Wepner asked three questions. They have been answered. Ms Gina Bloom asked 5 questions. They have been answered. Mr Neville Scott's 5 questions have been answered, as have Mr Neville Roberts. 5 questions from Karen Mowat have been answered, as have questions from Naomi Jenkins, who asked 5 questions. That takes us to 5.3.2, questions without due notice. There were nil. And now I'll ask if there's any member of the public gallery wishing to ask questions on an item that is not on the agenda. So other questions that do not relate to this agenda tonight. Mr Howling, you're first, followed by the lady in the back row.
Thank you. I do want to ask some questions that are not on the agenda. It relates to performance review of senior staff. Firstly, by what criteria are senior staff assessed? Secondly, when was the last occasion on which performance reviews were carried out of senior staff? Thirdly, did council note any concerns in respect of the performance reviews of senior staff? And if so, lastly, what was done in response to the performance review concerns expressed by council in relation to its senior staff? Thank you.
I'll have to take that on notice, Mr Howling, and I'm taking it you're talking about the CEO and all the executive directors. How far down the list do you take senior staff?
To management.
Okay, I'll have to take it on notice and we'll get back to you if we can. Lady, come forward and state your name and ask your questions, please.
My name's Tanya Ryan and I'm just curious, does the city openly support the yes vote for the voice, and has any funding, has any funding been provided to support a campaign in promoting the yes voice? If so, how much funding has been allocated and what approval process were applied, and were the ratepayers advised that this funding would be allocated to the yes vote?
My recollection is the council has not taken any formal position on the voice campaign.
So no money put towards it?
No fundings have been allocated, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on items not related to the agenda? Thank you. We'll now move to... have you got another question?
Sorry, Gina Bloom. Now, I do have a couple of questions. Has the city provided in the past and future budgets any funding for the LGBT community? And if so, specifically, what was and is this for, and how much for each event?
Mr Bishop, can you assist, other than that we support various community groups in the city?
Mr Mayor, I'd have to take it on notice because we'd have to go through the grant program to see what grants we've given out over I don't know, the last 12 months.
Have to take that on notice. Thank you, Ms Bloom.
Okay, my next question is, are there any books in any of the city's libraries relating to the LGBTQ transgender agendas in the city's libraries? And if so, what approval has been undertaken to decide that these books are suitable for children under age 12?
I think once again we'll have to take that on notice. Or Ms Hodgkins, Mr Bishop.
Mr Mayor, it depends on what you determine an agenda. There would be books that cover the subject matter, definitely. I couldn't tell you without taking it on notice how many books or what type of books, but yes, in a broad sense, yes.
So what approval process was undertaken for books, these pornographic books, but to be accessed by children that are 12 and under?
Mr Bishop.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's no pornographic books being accessed by children. Books are selected through a process involving the State Library and a process of selection. They're subject to censorship laws, etc. I can probably provide more information on notice as well if the questioner wants more detail.
Okay. Has the city approved any drag queen story time telling in any of its city facilities?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll have to take it on notice. But I would say the city has not, but I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're now moving on to item 6, which is public statement time, and registrations for public statement time for this meeting was required by 6 p.m. Tuesday the 12th of September, and no person listed to make a public statement. Item 7 is petitions. Does anyone in the gallery or councillors have a petition to present? Being no petitions, item 8 is deputations, and as you're aware, deputations for items on this agenda were held at last week's agenda forum held the 6th of September. And item 9, announcements by the presiding member. I have 2 short announcements, and it's with pleasure that I announce the opening of the New Stock Road, marking the completion of a landmark project within the city of Swan. This $71 million project features a bridge over the Allen Brook, rail crossing with boom gates, 5 T-intersections and a roundabout at Great Northern Highway. The Australian federal government provided $16.7 million in funding to make this project a reality, while the remaining $54.3 million was pre-funded by the city, and the developer contribution plan scheduled to reimburse these funds as the development progresses in that area. This upgrade will improve connectivity, slash travel times, reduce traffic congestion, particularly in around the Bullsbrook town site, boost road safety and allowing heavy haulage trucks to bypass the Bullsbrook town site. I thank everyone involved, particularly the city staff who led the project. The second item is I'm also very pleased to announce that the site has been secured by the state government for the highly anticipated Allenbrook Leisure Centre. The centre will be built near the new Allenbrook train station with land set aside by the state government. This will allow for the construction of a regional level facility featuring a 50-metre outdoor pool, other pools, 4 indoor sports courts and much more, meaning that we can meet a wider range of community needs. The state and federal governments have already committed $42 million to this project, with a similar level of funding being provided by the city. Thank you. That takes us on to the next item, leave of absence. And I have one from Councillor Congadin, who is seeking leave from the 4th to the 10th of October, the 26th of October to the 4th of November, the 10th of November to the 1st of December, and the 8th of December to the 12th of December. Are there any others, councillors? Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. 2nd of December to the 27th of December.
That was the 2nd? If you can fill out the appropriate form when you're ready, please. Any others, councillors? then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Move councillor Parry, seconded councillor Zanino. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried. Excuse me. Item 11 is confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 9th of August. I need a mover and a seconder. Move councillor Parry, seconded councillor Bowman. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare those minutes carried. Item 12, any business left over from the previous meeting is nil, which now takes us to part B of the agenda. And the adoption of those recommendations contained in items not withdrawn. And for the benefit of members observing the meeting, the council uses an en bloc method of decision making. This means that agenda items where council supports the officer's recommendation are not debated separately. One vote is taken on all the items and the officer's recommendation is therefore the decision of council unanimously. The following items have not been withdrawn for individual consideration and will be dealt with via the en bloc vote. Therefore, the officer's recommendation will be the decision of council. And in part B, it's item 5.2, Main Roads WA requests council's concurrence to dedicate 2 portions of land as public road as highway bypass interchange project in Hazelmere. Item 6.1, financial management report for the period ending July 31, 2023. And item 6.2, list of accounts paid by July 2023. Moved councillor Parry, seconded councillor Zanino. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare those 3 items carried, which takes us to the next part. And the following reports have been withdrawn for debate in accordance with the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2023 and will be dealt with by council individually. In part B is 4.1, the Responsible Authority Report for the old theatre building formerly Vaudeville Theatre and the expansion of the Guildford Hotel on James Street, Guildford. Item 4.2, New Junction Project Report. Item 5.1, City of Swan Water Fountains. Item 6.3, Sale of Land, Rates and Charges Outstanding for more than 3 years. Item 7.1, Change of Date, Special Council Meeting after the election 2023. Item 7.2 and 7.3 require absolute majority, and that's why they're in this part of the agenda. And 7.2 is the change to consolidate amendment of local law number 2, 2023. And 7.3, review of committees of council and advisory groups. So the first item we'll be dealing with is item 4.1, the Responsible Authority Report, adaptive reuse of the old theatre building, formerly the Vaudeville Theatre, for the expansion of the Guildford Hotel Tavern on James Street. It's on page 18. Councillor Johnson, you have an alternative motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My alternate motion is that council resolve to recommend to the Metro Joint Development Assessment Panel that the JDAP panel resolves to refuse the application. To record the reason to refuse the application is that A, although the application does not increase the existing Guildford Hotel capacity of 729 patrons, the additional 62 square metres provided by the addition of the Vaudeville on Lot 2 will likely increase the utilisation of the existing hotel capacity, and this will lead to increased demand for parking. B, no additional parking has been provided by the applicant. And C, there is a concern that the probable additional patrons will park in surrounding streets to the detriment of businesses and residential amenity.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Richardson. And just before I ask if there's anyone against, I've just been declared another disclosure of interest. It's from Councillor Richardson on this item that we're about to debate. It's an impartiality interest, and Councillor Richardson states she was a member of the Guildford Association and executive of the Guildford, on the executive of the Guildford Association. Thank you. I'll ask, is there anyone against? You wish to debate it? No one wishes to debate the item? Councillor Bowman, you do? Thank you. Then I'll ask you to open your debate. Councillor Johnson, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as I declared at the beginning of the meeting, I've got an impartiality interest in this because I founded the Guildford Hotel Action Group. When I saw that the Guildford Hotel, after it burnt down, nothing was happening. So it's been restored. It's absolutely fantastic. But now we've got a very interesting development application before us, and that is to make use of the Vaudeville Theatre, which is next door, and to incorporate it into the, if you like, area of the hotel. Now, clearly, this would improve the use of the hotel. It probably would be a great asset to Guildford, and it would be returning the Vaudeville to its original use as an entertainment centre. However, there is just one slight problem. The Guildford Hotel does not have a lot of parking. And part of the reason it doesn't have a lot of parking is at the time the Guildford Hotel was built, there were no cars. So probably that space out the back was probably a stable for horses, or horses were stabled somewhere else. The limited parking is also as a result of decisions of council from 2011 and later from 2015-16 when I was on council. And I think at that time the owner wanted, was seeking approval, which he got, the order of which I'm not quite certain of, but for a supermarket type development, and he got an approval for that. And I think he also managed to rezone part of the car park at the rear for use as a block of flats. And I think as a result of these agreements, the owner decided that he therefore could afford to go ahead with restoring the Guildford Hotel, and we have it as it is today. However, the extension of the Guildford Hotel's operation into the Vaudeville is going to increase, although it will not increase the total number of patrons, it's going to increase the utilisation of that capacity. So most of the time I imagine that there is not 729 people in the hotel. But if we increase the amount of space, likely the typical numbers in there will increase. So there'll be a greater utilisation of the hotel. There'll be more patrons. So if typically there are 500 in there, then maybe after the extension into the Vaudeville has been completed, there might be 600. Therefore, there'll be more people arriving. They will have to arrive somehow. Some of them will arrive in cars. Therefore, there is a need for more parking. And additional parking has not been provided. And it's fairly clear that that would be to the detriment of businesses who want customers to come and go, and residents. Residents in that area of Guildford who have got together and formed this new Friends of Guildford Historic Precinct, those streets are very small. They don't have auto parking. In many cases, the houses were built before the age of the car. So therefore, there's no parking. So therefore, they rely on street parking. So to be intensifying the Guildford Hotel's operations by, in effect, expanding it into the Vaudeville, I believe will be to the detriment of businesses and amenity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson is the seconder. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and those that came along tonight to support the decisions made tonight. Those that came along to the meeting on Thursday night in Guildford, we had such a large turnout of 65, I think approximately 65 people that I counted. It's probably one of the largest turnouts we've had that I've seen at any community meeting in the last, probably since 2013, which is about the time that I moved from Adelaide to Guildford and chose that to be my home. I quickly jumped on quite a few committees and also joined the Guildford Association to help preserve and protect Guildford, or would be any particular town that I moved to. At that time, from the Guildford Association, I was then invited to join the Guildford Executive and stayed on the executive until I was accepted into council. But I felt there was more that I could do, which would be similar to what we're doing tonight. In those years on that executive, there have been so many parking studies that have been paid for by residents, so many meetings after meeting regarding parking. This is not specific to the Guildford Hotel, but when we look at the lack of parking in Guildford and how it spreads into the side streets, at that time...
Councillor Richardson, can I just remind you should be addressing me and not the members of the gallery?
That's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So when we look back at those meetings, the executive meetings regarding the lack of parking and the issues that it was causing for residents, I remember Ethel Street being that poor little street. These are tiny streets, as we said, that were designed for horse and cart or, if not, walking provisions. So Ethel Street's almost a one-way street. So my example of how this impacts the residents, it's not just about approving parking for any business in the main street of Guildford, it's also how it impacts on the residents. So if Ethel Street in 2013 and beyond was being impacted back then I can tell you that after the festival on the weekend, my street was now impacted to the point where I had a car parked in front of my gates and I had no access to a
You
rear
have
car
1 minute
park.
left, thank you.
So if you think it's not going to spread and that there's ample parking in the back of the Guildford Hotel, I can say that it was recorded by city staff who had to come and the ranger had to come on the weekend and place a note on the driver's windscreen and then ring me to tell me that there was no tow truck available for me to access my property. There was no car parking available for myself or my husband to come home. Where was I supposed to put the trailer when we come home with the goods in it? Why would I park around in another street and put my neighbours out then? It is coming down the street. So yes, it's not a daily occurrence, but when things are on, residents are impacted. You can't just go and leave your cars in the street because they were double parked all down the street. I had 30 cars down my street that day. So if you think that we can approve this with 42 bays and the people in Johnson Street and Ethel Street and the side streets haven't been impacted already, I'm happy to provide those photos of my street that shows 30 cars in a street that wasn't designed for residents parking, visitors parking, and then on top of it, a festival, a band,
Thank you, Councillor Richardson, that's your time.
local amount. Please take that into consideration tonight, councillors, that it is expanding into the side
Thank
streets.
you. Speaker against the motion? Councillor Bowman, do you indicate you want to speak?
Oh, Mr Mayor, I wanted to actually hear the debate. That's why I've raised my hand. Mr Mayor, I wanted to hear what Councillor Johnson and Councillor Richardson had to say. I wanted to hear why they moved the alternative recommendation. And Mr Mayor, it sounds to me that we're all in agreement restoring the building is a great outcome, but there's a parking problem. Mr Mayor, I see the parking problem as a problem that was created in 2011, not this application. Mr Mayor, I don't know why back in 2011 they didn't have numbers on the planning approval, but we've been told 729. Mr Mayor, I agree that if you're a business, you're not going to do something if it's not going to increase your turnover, your revenue. So if there's regularly 400 or 500 people there, they may get to the 700. I agree with that. But Mr Mayor, we can't go back on a decision that council made. And one of the things that I asked, and thank the staff, because I was asking about a condition and why there wasn't a condition from start about reciprocal parking, and staff have worded up another condition for me that the owners of Lot 18, the Guildford Hotel site, to provide to the owners of Lot 2 a right of access to and use of the existing car park on Lot 18. Mr Mayor, there is major problems in parking in Guildford. Mr Mayor, I don't agree that 42 parking bays is sufficient for the Guildford Hotel, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the extension of the use of the building next door. Mr Mayor, 42 car parking bays, in my opinion, should never have been approved, but it did get approved. There's a 729 limit. I think the applicant wanted more, but perhaps they got advice to say, you haven't got a hope. You actually haven't got a hope. And so they reduced it down and reduced it down. Mr Mayor, I'm torn between this one because I don't agree with the application. However, the planning requirements that I can see that's the only concern is the numbers.
You have 1 minute left, thank
that
you.
goes back to the 2011 approval.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion? Speaker against the motion? Councillor McCulloch, you have 3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. City officers have answered, they've clarified and provided specific responses in regards to the concerns around the RA. And if the Vaudeville Theatre was developed in another way, there would be additional patronage to the precinct. So is this building never to be activated? We need to ask ourselves these questions. We want to be attracting investors to develop underutilised buildings within Guildford to bring that vibrancy and activation. We want to showcase Guildford to value the restoration of our valuable heritage and ensure the integrity of that heritage precinct is preserved. Yes, people are talking about parking concerns. I think future considerations are around peripheral and reciprocal parking considerations. Yes, reducing congestion on critical roadway junctions as well. Rethinking our urban transport policy and infrastructure, that clean and inclusive mobility, all of those considerations that we need to look to post this conversation and this application. But as I've said, city officers have answered, they've clarified and provided the specific responses. This application stands alone. City officers are happy and have recommended approval. We want to see this very different activation, very separate to utilisation and uses of the hotel. Family atmospheres, providing connectivity to other small struggling businesses in the street. It's going to add to the streetscape and the street scope. It's also going to add to that mosaic of uses, and that term was used, and will enhance the precinct. I want to see the enrichment and improvement of the area. I want to see and ensure the integrity of the heritage precinct preserved. We're removing a crossover and revitalising James Street and celebrating an old historic gem. An old newspaper article states it's superior to any hall out of Perth. I think she deserves to be tenderly restored and utilised with children enjoying and playing. There are similarities to the redevelopment of the Claremont Hotel. Licensed for 1,600 people, it has 2 car bays. It generated a technical requirement for 650 car parking bays, which would have been the death of the Claremont Activity Centre. Since its opening, it's had a major revitalisation effect on Bayview Terrace and the wider town centre. So we do need to look at the future and addressing the future needs of our transport and mobility, and some of that is also clearly defined in our city plans and policies. This conversation tonight is important. Let's get this through, and then let's look at our longer term parking solutions for our beautiful Guildford. Thank you, that is your time.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Congdon, you have 3 minutes when you start.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'd like to refer back to last week when we had Mr Merger present a business case for the refusal of this development, and he promised to supply the number of businesses that engaged him to deliver that information to the city. As of today, we still don't have that information, and an email came back through today saying he would try and provide it today, but there were other numbers of businesses that had joined his particular group. So I'm disappointed that we haven't got that information to refer back to and do a cross-reference. I understand that on the 9th of June that Urbis did a street walk, knocked on all the businesses, spoke to a lot of the businesses on the street in relation to this. And again, it was followed up on June the 16th with the hotel doing their own Facebook survey campaign. And on June the 21st, there was an in-house consultation that took place. So on the June the 16th Facebook, there were 75% of the respondents were happy, 12% were unhappy, and 13% were neutral. On the meeting that occurred on the 21st, I'm advised that there were less than 12 people turned up to that meeting, which will give you a strong indication that the representation here tonight either didn't get the information, weren't engaged to say come along and have a look, or maybe didn't care, I don't know. There's an item from Councillor Johnson's motion that talks about the 729 patrons that are going to not change. So in theory, the parking doesn't change, the traffic issues don't change. But there is a comment in there that says that
You have 1 minute left,
Thank you. 62 metres provided by the additional of the Vaudeville on Lot 2 will likely increase the utilisation of the existing hotel capacity. That hasn't been really formally explained to me of how that's actually going to happen if the patron numbers of 729 are going to be set in stone at this stage and not change. So I can't support Councillor Johnson's motion.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Speakers against the motion. Councillor Henderson. You have 3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, there's a significant problem here, and the fact is we have a very large business, 700 plus people can attend, and the reality is that they're going to spread out their parking all around that large business. Now, the community have expressed very clearly that they are concerned about that, and I think this will absolutely be approved by JDAP. I'll be very, very surprised if it isn't, going on how JDAP works and having attended many a meeting on that board. The point is that I think the car parking issue has got to be addressed, and I think it can be addressed by the council changing its parking laws and requirements for parking in Guildford. I do believe that that's a separate matter entirely, and if we go about a process to set up so that the other smaller businesses don't get swamped by all these cars, then they will have a better chance of continuing to grow their business. And the fact is, I too received a deputation from some people this afternoon, which has already been discussed. I agree entirely that we need to develop and grow and expand Guildford as a destination to enjoy. So I'm going to vote against this because I think we can fix the parking issues by appropriate parking laws and making it such that other businesses can operate effectively, but importantly, because I think we need to actually activate as much as we can to allow more for people to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask once more, any other speakers for or against? Councillor Howlett, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a difficult decision to make. After reading the report, I do see the value in the restorative work that is proposed in the application. However, I'm not in support of the officer's recommendation, so I'm in support of Councillor Johnson's motion. The report talks a lot about the high percentage of rideshare users that use the rideshare to visit the hotel, and they all need to embark and disembark, which requires the vehicles to stop. So whilst I think it's being offered as some kind of solution to parking, I don't see it as being any solution to parking. And there was mention in the question time also tonight, the gentleman mentioned about the Uber Eats type services that collect from the kitchen at the Guildford Hotel, which I thought was a very interesting angle, which I hadn't considered. And these drivers more so do need to park because they need to disembark their vehicle to attend the hotel to collect the order and sometimes wait while it's being prepared. So that is a provision that I don't think has been considered when we talk about the patronage of 729. So that is a concern for me. The 44 objections received during the public advertising period all cited concerns with the traffic generation on the road network. So the traffic is a massive problem. We do need to come to a solution with parking. I don't know what the answer is, but for Guildford in total. But I mean, Guildford is a finite product. We cannot necessarily just keep increasing its activation. It is an activated space. It is a great area. So I'm hesitant to perhaps think that because it's going to generate more patronage potentially, that it's a good idea. So
You have
that
1 minute left, thank you.
Thank you. That in conjunction with the stated intent in the report, and then the removal of the combined increased capacity from 729 to 950. That's a bit of a warning bell to me. Why would a business invest so much money in restoring the Vaudeville Theatre if they did not have an intention to increase their bottom line? It's business sense. So, yeah, it is a difficult decision to make, but I will be supporting Councillor Johnston's motion tonight, and I urge other councillors to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors speaking for or against the motion? Then, before I hand to you, Councillor Johnston, I'll enter the debate. I'll hand the chair to the Deputy Mayor, and I'll be as brief as I can. I don't support the motion, and a couple of reasons why. Parking in Guildford has been a big problem, even when the hotel wasn't operating, when it was burnt down. And part of the condition of having it rebuilt was those 42 bays. That's why there is no more bays. Otherwise, the hotel would most probably still be in its state of disrepair and may have even fallen over through neglect. But there's other parking problems in Guildford. You go to the other side of the railway line, you go out front of the Rose and Crown along that strip down there, you've got parking problems. Why? Because Guildford was developed in the horse and cart day before motor vehicles were even invented. You go to the Postie Cafe, you know we've had problems with parking outside that premises and other places. We've been asked to put barriers around Stirling Square to stop people parking on the lawn under the sugar gum trees. So parking will be a problem in Guildford. That's why we have actually got a Guildford parking and traffic management policy and study, and I think that needs to be further developed, as Councillor Henderson said, to find a way where we can give local residents or local businesses priority so they can park on their own streets without being disadvantaged. But looking at this application on planning grounds, I can't find any reason that I can't support the officer's recommendation because there is no increase to the overall numbers. I could perhaps go on for another minute or so, but I just feel I had to say those few words. Being on council at the time when we reapproved the occupancy of the Guildford Hotel to bring it back to some of its former glory, that was the trade-off. And I know there's on-foot, thank you, there's on-foot applications for either a supermarket and, from memory, a 5-storey unit development on that unused portion of the car park. They are still live and could come in next year or in 5 years' time until they've lapsed. So I can't support the alternative recommendation. I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation if it gets to that. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. You have your right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, in our local planning scheme, it says that when making decisions, we need to have due regard to community concerns, so we don't have to slavishly follow officer recommendations. We do have a particular challenge in Guildford because, as the Mayor says, it was developed in the horse and cart era and there was no provision for parking. Parking behind hotels typically is a result of land becoming free as a result of the demolition of stables. The 42 bay decision made in 2011 is a decision that's been made and it really is not enough parking. Councillor Henderson came along to the public meeting on Monday and would have heard the community. And I think, as I said earlier, there's a need to have due regard to the community view when making planning decisions. But having heard what the community said absolutely categorically, doesn't feel that there's anything we need to do here, except perhaps we can revisit parking in Guildford. But we already have a Guildford access and parking policy that I think was passed only 3 or 4 years ago, which was an attempt to address that. I don't think we need to change that again. Councillor Howlett said Guildford is a successful product, and I would say we need to protect that product. We need to maintain it. If we intensify Guildford, we're going to have a bit of a problem. Councillor Congerton said that he'd asked the agenda forum for a list of the businesses that supported.
Sorry, what's your point of order?
I did not ask for the list. Someone else asked for the list, and the organisation said they would provide it.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson. I thought you referred to Mr. Magic providing some information. Councillor Cong, I don't know if that's the same list that Councillor Johnson is talking about or not, but I see it as a moot point. If you can continue your debate, thanks, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, basically it's the same list. But basically, Friends of Guildford Historical Precinct is a new group. It may not be so well organised that it can produce a membership and say, yes, we've got 20 business owners. So, but it was pretty clear from the meeting on Monday night that the businesses there were quite well represented and didn't like it. Councillor McCulloch said that is Guildford never to be activated? Well, this presumably when referring to the vaudeville. Well, the vaudeville has
1
been
minute left, thank you.
activated. In recent times, I recall it's been a shop, it's been a museum, and I think if you go further back, it's been a motor repair business, and right back at the beginning when it was constructed, it was a theatre. So it is activated. It has been in use in recent times. Councillor Bowman made some very good points. You're not going to do something if it's not going to increase revenue. And if it increases revenue, it must increase patrons because the money for the revenue has to come out of their wallets. Increasing patrons is bound to increase parking. 42 bays is not enough. So if we can't have more bays, we can't expand into the vaudeville. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you. I'm now going to put the vote. Those in favour of Councillor Johnson's motion, please raise your hand. I have Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight and Councillor Richardson. I make that 7. Those opposed, please raise your hand. I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor McCulloch. That is 8. The motion is lost. Thank you. I need a motion, councillors. You're moving the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCulloch. Is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? No. What's your amendment? And I'll see if it's suitable to the mover and the seconder.
Mr Mayor, I'd like another new condition be added. The owners of Lot 18, the Guildford Hotel site, to provide to the owners of Lot 2 a right of access to and use of the existing car park on Lot 18.
I'll just see if that is a possibility. Is there any issue? Yeah, I'll need it passed to the minute clerk so we can put it on the whiteboard. And I'll seek direction from planning staff to see if it's achievable.
From the planning staff.
Okay, thank you. I'll just wait for the minute clerk to place it onto the whiteboard so you can all see it. Once it's on the whiteboard, I'll see if that amendment is acceptable to both the mover and the seconder, and if it is, it'll be form part of the substantive motion. Now it's on the whiteboard and on the screens in front of you, I'll ask Councillor Congdon, you accept the amendment? Councillor McCulloch is the seconder. So the amendment becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll now ask if there's people against and wish to debate it. You wish to debate it? Thank you. Then Councillor Congdon, you can open your debate. You have 3 minutes.
Question first.
Question, Councillor Johnson.
I understood that I'm not opposed to the concept, but I understood that the format of a recommendation to JDAP that is the council is providing an additional recommendation in addition to the officers. So surely the amendment needs to be worded along those lines. So it's an amendment to the officer's recommendation. It should say to provide a recommendation from council that the owners of lot 18, etc., etc.
My understanding is that this council has made lots of amendments or variations to previous recommendations to JDAP, particularly in regards to trees and car parking spaces. So
can we get the staff to help us with this? Because I think that's the form.
Do you hear the question, Mr. Russell?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B. In the past, yes, we have formulated it in the manner that Councillor Johnson suggests, but I don't believe in any way, shape or form that is merely the officer's recommendation, which is in the attachment to the RA, with that added in. I think it's 6 or 1/2 dozen of the other, Mr. Mayor. We will certainly, if it's passed like that, we will certainly transmit clearly the officer's recommendation for approval with all the conditions, and that as an additional condition. It suffices.
Thank you, I'm satisfied with that. You wish to debate it, councillor?
Mr Mayor, I want to put the motion.
Then I'll have to...
Amendment.
Well, what's your point of order?
A question, and that is, in the new rules, anyone could ask for the motion to be debated. So is that going to then be overridden by somebody that wants to then put the motion?
Well, I've now received a motion to be put. I'm just, these are only new meeting procedures, I'm going to have a quick reference or refer to our governance officer, but I believe now that I've had that procedural motion provided to me, I'll have to deal with that first. Can you assist me on the section?
No, actually, I think my question needs to be answered first, because my question is, can the motion, which is just a procedural motion, be put when actually the meeting procedures expressly gives somebody, one of the members in the meeting, the opportunity to debate it.
And that's exactly what.
That's right.
That's what I'm dealing with now.
Oh, we're going to get an answer to that, are we?
As I said, the meeting procedures have changed. I'm just looking it up and I'll give you the answer.
Great, thanks.
But I believe that the motion to be put will be the first priority. Well, the mover's moving the motion to be put. The mover of the motion.
You have to ask the seconder then.
Okay. It's on page 28 under procedural motions that a motion be put now, and I'm required to ask the consent of both the mover and the seconder of the substantive motion. And seeing that the mover of the substantive motion is also moved that the motion be put, I'm now seeking consent of the seconder, which I have. So I now have to put that to the vote immediately. So the motion is, councillors, that we put the officer's recommendation to the vote now without any further debate. Those in favour? I have Councillor... With the amendment, yes, because that was part of the substantive motion. So I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Congdon, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino and Councillor McCulloch, which is 5. The motion to put the motion is lost. So we'll go back. I'll ask again, Councillor Congdon, do you want to open the debate? Thank you. There's the second to Councillor McCulloch.
No, I think I've said it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Amendment.
What's your amendment, councillor
My
Johnson?
amendment is to request the JDAP panel consider requesting the applicant to provide additional parking.
Well, I think that's contrary to the motion that's just been defeated.
No, it's not.
I'll just seek some advice from planning staff on that amendment. If you could say it again, councillor Johnson, to make sure that we've got it recorded.
Sure, I can get it exactly as I said it before. That council request that the JDAP panel consider requesting the applicant to provide additional parking.
I'll just wait for the minute clerk to have that transcribed to your satisfaction. Request additional parking.
From the applicant.
You see any issues with that, Mr Russell?
Mr Mayor, I don't understand it.
Well, councillor Johnson is requesting that his amendment, as I said, that's what I'm asking, is that the council request JDAP request additional parking from the applicant. I just want to make sure that that is a fair amendment before I call for a seconder to the officer's report.
Sorry, you seeking comment, Mr Mayor?
I am.
Can I understand, please, do you mean to move the officer's recommendation, which will be as articulated in the report attachment, to approve the development with a series of conditions, and then this is a supplementary second part resolution to ask that the JDAP consider, notwithstanding what you've already moved, that they actually go away and consider some unspecified additional parking?
I believe that's what councillor Johnson's intent is, yes.
Okay.
So it's just an additional recommendation alongside the officer report, which we've done in the past.
Okay. I'll see if that's acceptable to the mover and the seconder. And it's not.
Question.
Councillor Prodovnik, you have a question?
I do, just in response to Mr Russell's response. I understand what councillor Johnson is trying to do. Is there a way of doing it that isn't as confusing?
I don't believe so. As it is, the amendment that was already becomes substantively to the officer's recommendation, which was put by councillor, I haven't got me, councillor Bowman, which was accepted by both the mover and the seconder, becomes part of the officer's recommendation, but it'll go in as a separate part because it wasn't part of their actual report. Now I'm asked that councillor Johnson is asking to submit another amendment which is not agreeable to both the mover and the seconder, and that will need to be debated. So I'll call for a seconder. Councillor Richardson, is there anyone against? I think they want the amendment. If you can scroll up, Kathy. So I've got it as that the council requests that the JDAP request additional parking from the applicant. Is that correct, councillor Johnson?
Yeah, that's close to it, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so I'll ask again. We'll need to debate it. I've got a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone against? You're against, so councillor Johnson, you've got 3 minutes to open your debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Mr Mayor, if we're not going to provide a recommendation to JDAP to reject the application out of fund, then the next best thing and the most obvious thing really is to suggest that the JDAP request additional parking from the applicant. The JDAP has the right to vary the conditions. What we have here is a report from our officers, and we're merely recommending a change, and the JDAP panel is perfectly at liberty to make that change, and it is entirely possible to do that because there is an awful lot of unutilised, unsealed land, which is not part of the existing parking behind the Guildford Hotel. And which is also, and that land is also owned by the Guildford Hotel. The JDAP is quite within its rights to request additional parking. So instead of having ideas that we might find more parking in Guildford by presumably removing verges or concreting over other parts of the green part of Guildford, that limestone area at the back, which is not currently part of the parking, that can be modified by the JDAP and sealed and used as additional approved parking. So to me, it's the obvious next best thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson as the seconder.
Oh, thank you, Mayor and councillors. I think, as Councillor Johnson said, the next best thing we can do is request that change. I mean, it's the least we can do for the community who came to the town hall on Thursday night, and there's 65 people that turned up, and those that came tonight and filled the gallery as well. I mean, there is no harm in asking for extra spaces. There is that extra land out the back. There was no parking detailed map supplied. I'm sure that they could whip up a few more bays, but there's no harm in asking, and I support him asking through.
Thank you. Speaker against the amendment. Councillor Congdon.
Mr Mayor, I find it almost impossible that JDAP could even accommodate the request, given you'd need to specify bays where, and if they have to be sealed, unsealed, what the costs are, etc., etc.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment. Any other speakers for or against the amendment? You're right to reply to the amendment. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. Look, councillors, this is just a bit of common sense. There's no harm in asking for this. It's the next best thing. And as Councillor Congdon well knows, it's up to the JDAP to decide. The JDAP can add additional conditions if they want, and they can specify themselves whether it is sealed, unsealed, and the exact number of car parking bays. The land is available, and this would be a great benefit to the hotel and the community. I think we need to make this simple common sense suggestion to the JDAP panel. Thank you, and I hope you'll all support this because it is just common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the amendment, councillors, and that amendment is that the council request, the JDAP request additional parking from the applicant. Those in favour? I have Councillor Bowman, Councillor Podovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight and Councillor Richardson. I make that 8. Those against were Councillor Jones, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson and Councillor McCulloch, which is 7. The amendment is passed and will form part of the report that goes to JDAP. Now, we come back to the substantive motion. I'll ask now, is there anyone against? You still wish to debate it? Thank you, Councillor Catalano. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. And the reason why I want to debate it is because I want to just talk about sustainability, because really what we're dealing with here tonight is sustainability issues around car use and car parking and roads and tarmacking our residential and commercial spaces. And I think this is nothing new. What we're experiencing here, the kind of the conflicts that we're hearing about aren't exclusive to Guildford. They are exclusive right across the planet. And I think that instead of us sort of thinking about it in terms of our little bubble here, that in fact we start thinking a little bit more broadly about how we might be able to curtail the use of private cars in precincts like Guildford, because in fact what's going to happen is ultimately what is attracting people to that area is going to be basically the car itself is going to. Thank you.
Sorry, continue.
Yes,
I don't know
thanks
why
for that.
that's.
So the force of the amount of cars that want to use and park that in that area, that in a heritage area that's not designed for that, is ultimately going to kill it. So what we're doing tonight is the wrong thing, because what we're doing is we're kicking that consideration and the whole sustainability consideration a little bit further down the track. And at the same time as we're doing that, what we're actually doing is making the congestion in Guildford worse. So in fact, what we're going to be left with is still have to solve the problem later on if we vote for this tonight, and we're going to have more congestion that we're going to have to solve. So that's why we need to start thinking a little bit more broadly about the problem that we've got. And another thing I wanted to say was, you know, heritage doesn't just exist in Guildford.
1 minute left, thank you.
Heritage exists in Midland. And in fact, what we could do is we could spend a little bit of money and encourage the spending of money in Midland and doing more to enhance the heritage character of Midland, so that in fact we wouldn't have everybody driving to Guildford, and in that driving to Guildford to enjoy the heritage there, they're actually wrecking it, or potentially will wreck it, because just the force of numbers. So this is not about, you know, one community or business versus community, or it is about how we use and how we actually can, it's a we need to be thinking much more holistically about these issues, these sustainability issues. And I think we need to send that message to JDAP.
Thank you,
And that's why we need to oppose it.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the officer's recommendation with the amendments of Councillor Bowman and Councillor Johnson to the council. Those in favour? Sorry. Sorry. I just want to get there. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Henderson, you have 3 minutes.
I just wanted to cover quickly, if I can, the old chestnut, the sustainability. I just simply can't understand that, because simply, this is a business that they're running. If people can't get to that hotel in their car, or that pub, guess what? In the future, they'll lose business. Or if they have to catch an Uber or a train or ride their bike or even walk, well, that becomes the sustainable argument in the end. So, to me, they already have an approval for a number of people. That's what they will continue to have. So the sustainability argument around that remains the same. Nothing changes. It's about supply and demand. That's the key here. This business, if they overdo it and basically try and exceed their numbers, they're going to be in trouble. If they get to a point where people won't go there anymore, they'll go broke. We know that won't happen. People always work out a way for business to work. I do think that we've got to get down to the reality here, and that is there is a fixed number. Think a bit more. Well, that's what the business will have to do to sustain their business. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm going to support the motion in its amended format, specifically because Council's been so kind as to support my motion to request JDAP request additional parking from the applicant. It's an unusual condition, but it's possible because the land is available. So I think this may enable us to get a way forward that would meet the expectations of the community. It's not the best solution, but as I've said a few times recently, the perfect is the enemy of the good, and I think this is the best we're going to get. So I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No other speakers. Councillor Congdon, you're right to reply if you wish.
Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, 729 numbers are 729, not 829, not 1,029, 729. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion as amended twice, once by Councillor Bowman, once by Councillor Johnson. Those in favour?
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but Councillor Bowman's motion wasn't carried, and then just from a technical perspective, I think it's really important that the motion that was carried, the last motion, where it reads that another condition be added to the officer's recommendation, it should be that it add a second recommendation or another part recommendation. So it can't be another condition, it needs to be a separate recommendation to the JDAP.
Well, my recollection was Councillor Bowman's passed 8 votes to 7.
Mr Mayor, with your indulgence, the mover and the seconder agreed to include it in the motion. Although it originated from my mouth, on the board, it's Councillor Congdon and Councillor
Accepted it, so that became part, yes. Then so the whiteboard needs to be corrected now. And that was carried. 8 votes to 7. Yes, and I got to the point of putting it, and then I was interrupted. I don't think there's any provision. We've got to this point now, I've got to put that motion to the council. So, those in favour of the officer's recommendation as amended, I'll ask you to raise your hand now. I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson and Councillor McCulloch. I make that 13. Those opposed, I have Councillor Catalano and Councillor Knight. The motion is passed 13 to 2. I thank you for your indulgence. We go on to the next item, item 4.2, new junction reports on page 56. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the amendment, sorry, my motion is slightly different to one that's been published in the in tonight's agenda, but I have given a copy. It's actually up on the board, so perfect. So the one on the board is the one that we're going to be voting on tonight. Okay, so my motion is, it is recommended that Council resolve to make the New Junction Project Report 2011 to 2022 publicly available, and 2, at the conclusion of each financial year, provide an annual New Junction Project Report, including statement of comprehensive income, statement of financial position, brackets balance sheet, statement of financial activity, and statement of equity to Council, and publish the report on the City's website. And 3, record the reason is that there is no such requirement for Council to approve the report in the resolution of Council that was held on July the 7th, 2021, being item C1.1, Councillor Johnson's financial reporting for the New Junction project.
Thank you. You're seconding that, Councillor Bowman. Do I have anyone against? Yes. Councillor Catalano, do you wish to debate it?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. There's people against. Councillor Howell, if you could open your debate, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, in general terms, I am in full support of the officer's recommendation, albeit with this one exception, and that is to remove point 1, approve the New Junction project. My motion seeks to amend it in the smallest of ways by removing point 1 and keeping point 2 and 3. For me, it all hinges around the word approve, and that's the word that I was seeking to remove by putting forward this motion. It's fair to say that aspects detailed in this report, or these reports, these financial reports, have already been approved by way of past council decisions and authorised delegated authority. So there really is no need for this council to approve the report prior to publishing it. Yes, it's basically the word approve that I'm wanting to avoid using. Thank you.
Thank you. After I've heard from, are you happy? You have a question, Councillor Catalano?
Yes, I just wanted a question, have that point clarified about whether this motion of Councillor Howlett's anyway approves the spending of the money that's been spent by this council on New Junction up until now.
Mr Van der Linde?
Mr Mayor, the money that's been spent, that's reflected in this report, has been approved by council through previous council resolutions.
Okay, so then the question I'd like to ask is why did we have it in the original officer's report, motion, that there was, the first point was to approve this set of figures?
Thank you, Mr Van der Linde.
Mr Mayor, if you look at the council resolution of the 7th of July 2021, it is a request that the officers prepare those reports and to provide a quarterly report to council. So if you prepare the report, put it to council. If we put it to council, for what reason would we put it to council? It's to get some form of resolution from council, and the logic would tell that that would either be to accept what you put to council or not to accept what you put to council.
I just want to say then, from what you've said, that this is basically an acceptance of what's been put to council previously, and if that's what your answer is, then I will continue on with my objection. Thank you.
That's fine. Councillor Bowman is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I totally agree with what Councillor Howard said. My concern was the word approve. All we are doing, which is what has been asked, is to make these figures available to the public. That's what we're doing. Whether we agree with the figures or not is neither here nor there, because that's not what this motion is about.
Thank you. Speaker.
An amendment?
And what's your amendment, Councillor?
Instead of say make the new junction, could I say that council notes the and then the rest of it?
I'll just make sure that the minute clerk understands. So you're asking that the line 1.1, the word make comes out, and your amendment would have been I don't think that reads correctly if you do that. And makes them publicly available. I'll just ask if the mover and the seconder are acceptable to that amendment. It should be on your whiteboard now.
Yeah. I just have a quick look.
Councillor Howlett, if you can just look at your screen or the whiteboard.
Have the council resolved to council notes the New Junction project report. I don't see the need for this amendment.
Okay,
actually.
so you don't accept it?
No, thank you.
No, that's fine. It's not acceptable by the mover and the seconder, Councillor Bowman. No, okay. So you can either move it as an amendment if you get a second to Councillor Henderson, or we'll just proceed. Okay. I'll ask again. There's been no amendments made. Is there anyone against and wishes to debate it? No. The substantive motion. Okay. Well, then I'll wait for Councillor. Okay, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. And the reason why I want to debate, well, want to oppose it, is because I don't want there be any doubt in anyone's mind from here on that I do not accept the figures that are going to be put out to the public. In fact, these figures are pretty much available on the public record already, and even before I came on council in 2019, I'd already worked out that this council had almost spent, well, had spent nearly $45 million of ratepayers' money on this new junction project to be built over Midland's historic 120-year-old oval. And 33.1 million of the rates money, because that's at the end of the day is what it is, the ratepayer has to pay, was spent on buying private property around the oval. And this was done without public knowledge. In 2015, one property alone on the Crescent was
Point of
bought
order, Mr. Mayor.
for...
Relevance.
Sorry, point of order.
Relevance. We're talking about releasing financial reports, not what Councillor Catalano is talking about.
I uphold the point of order. If you can stay on track, Councillor Catalano, your debate should be about whether we release the report and do so every year from now on.
Yes, well, it's also about why I can't accept the report and why I can't accept the decisions that were made prior to my coming on council. And that is because one property alone was bought for 4.5 million, which is around...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Relevance. Again, we are talking about the financial report, not about purchasing property previously.
Thank you. I think you've made it well known, Councillor Catalano, that you don't support any of the reports or the spending, but this is about...
But I can say why, can't I?
Well, this is about releasing the report, the financial reports, to the public. So if I could ask you to stay on track.
Why can't I say why? That $33 million...
I think you've said why, Councillor Johnson. I've had 2 points of order. I ask you to stay focused. Sorry, who did I say? I was reading Councillor Johnson's name on the screen. Sorry. Councillor Catalano, if you can continue to debate and keep it relevant to the subject before us. Thank you.
Okay, that's $33 million that's gone into the pockets of private property owners while the rest of Midland has languished. What a difference it would have made if that money had been spent in Midland Town Centre. Prior to asking for more details about these property purchases in 2018, the ratepayers didn't know about these purchases. It had all been done in secret without a business plan.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
I do believe you've ruled twice on it, but
I have, and Councillor Catalano, if you go off point once more, I'll prohibit you from talking for the rest of this debate item. You'll still be able to vote, but you won't be able to talk if you go back in history. We're talking about releasing the financials. Thank you. Stay on point.
So now we're back to the future with the same old new junction plan that was rejected by many ratepayers and councillors because it doesn't provide enough public open space for Midland Central Park to meet
Mr.
the
Mayor,
amenity
point of
needs.
order.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Catalano. I tried warning you. You could please resume your seat. You're prohibited from talking for the rest of this debate item. Thank you. I'll ask, are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it is a challenging subject to talk to this, and I'll keep to the topic. Councillors, the effect of this motion is that it releases the financial report that we asked for, or we voted in favour of about 2 years ago now. A lot of the information is in the public domain, but a lot of it is not. Importantly, it places in the public domain the financial information in a standard accounting format, and it does not really release any confidential information to the detriment of anybody. It was always intended to be released, and it was always intended to be released in this standard accounting format. It contains valuable information for our community, and another important point is that it demonstrates this council's governance over this project. It shows that we have asked for the right information, and we're in possession of it. And because it is in a format that is designed to be consumed by the public, designed to be consumed by accountants who can understand it and comment on it, I think it's therefore vital that it's put out in the public domain. So I've long supported this information being released, and I think now is our opportunity. Our community are expecting this, and when they receive it, I think they will see that Council has exercised governance over the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? No other speakers. Councillor Howlett, you're right to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have nothing more to add. I think we can just go straight to vote.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion. Those in favour of Councillor Jones, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Congdon and myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson and Councillor McCulloch. That is 14. One against, Councillor Catalano. Thank you. That takes us to the next item, 5.1, City of Swan Water Fountains. It's item 5.1 on page 61 of the agenda. Thank you, councillors.
Mr Mayor,
And just before we start, Councillor Bowman, it's that close to 8 o'clock. We're going to have a 10-minute break and come back after that. Thank you.
There's been a lot going on tonight. Proceed.
Thank you, councillors. We'll now proceed. We're on item 5.1, City of Swan water fountains. It's on page 61 of your agenda. Councillor Bowman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I move that Council resolves to endorse the installation of water fountains at priority 1, 2, 3 and 4 identified parks. 2, include a budget allocation of the draft long-term financial plan of $80,000 for 3 years commencing 24-25. And 3, the reason for changing the officer recommendations is city's funds should be directed to the highest priority locations. Priority 5 and 6 parks can be reconsidered in the future.
Thank you. You're seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? You have an amendment, Councillor Catalano. What's your amendment, please?
That insert it to endorse the installation of 2 drinking water fountains at 2 parks in Bennett Springs to be identified.
I'll just wait for the minute clerk to put that in. Can I ask you to read that again?
It's
you've got
to endorse the installation of drinking water fountains at 2 parks in Bennett Springs to be, in 2 parks to be identified in Bennett Springs. Put it that way, it's better English. Yeah, and then endorse the installation of drinking water fountains at 2 parks to be identified in Bennett Springs. And then I've just got a question.
Your question?
In terms of the allocation of the extra allocation of funds and whether the allocation of funds needs to be increased, perhaps to.
Okay, I'll just see if there's any opposition from the mover or the seconder. Yeah, opposed to it? Okay, and thank you. So it's not accepted by the mover or the seconder, Councillor Catalano.
I'd like to move it then.
Well, yes, I understand that. I'll ask for a seconder.
Yep.
Councillor Singh. Is there anyone against other than the mover and the seconder? Okay, you've got 3 minutes to start your debate on your amendment. Thank you, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Okay, so the Bennett Springs Residents and Ratepayers Association came to the annual electors meeting in 2022, as we know, with a request for water fountains in all their parks in Bennett Springs. And that was after they'd canvassed Bennett Springs residents and ratepayers about what they wanted, what issues they wanted to be brought to that electors meeting. And they went out of their way to canvass that information from the residents and ratepayers. They went out of their way to come to the electors meeting, and their motion was put, and other ratepayers at that meeting, they endorsed that, that motion that was put by the Bennett Springs ratepayers. So everybody was happy for the money to be spent on those water fountains in Bennett Springs. And now we've got this absolutely absurd outcome, and that is that the very suburb that made the request for the water fountains has actually got no allocation of water fountains in the future. It defeats the whole point of what the ratepayers, the Bennett Springs ratepayers, the Bennett Springs community resolved at that electors meeting. Yes, there's a hierarchy of parks and, you know, water fountains put in, you know, top level parks, and yes, there's policies and procedures and there's all kinds of bureaucracy. But the difference here is that the water fountains were requested by the Bennett Springs group, and the ratepayers who were at that meeting, in fact, pretty much all of them, I don't think there was any opposition, endorsed it. In my mind, this overrides all the policy and all the bureaucracy and all the other things, the hierarchies.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
If community groups, on behalf of other residents and ratepayers in their community, and are motivated to come along and put their requests to council and get other ratepayers to endorse it. That is the ultimate test, and they, in my mind, have achieved it. That is why I want to see Bennett Springs get at least 2. That's not what they asked for, but it's at least water fountains in 2 parks. Finally, water fountains are not going to break the bank. We've seen it in the report, $13,000. I mean, this is actually chicken feed compared to what we're spending on other things. Yeah, it is. What was that? $50 million for Stock Road. What was that for Midland Oval? $45 million. Yeah, this is $13,000 for a water fountain. 2 water fountains for people who have asked for it, who specifically came along and requested it of
Thank you,
council, and
Councillor
other
Catalano. That's
ratepayers
your time.
agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
A question, Mr Mayor.
Question, Councillor Congdon.
Thank you. Question of Councillor Catalano. Councillor Catalano, have you got any idea of which 2 parks?
No, and I think that that's something that can be identified either by the council looking at their hierarchy or system of hierarchies of parks, or even possibly by putting it to the community group who requested it. I don't think that's very hard. That's actually a very easy thing to do. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Singh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Why I'm support this motion, because the Bennett Spring is part of the city of Swan as well. And if the community groups has been requested previously, and then the city has been going tracking and check which parks is recommended for that, for the water fountain, I think they must have to be considered for what the community requesting. Even sometime we said the community members don't attend it, they're not interested some of the items, but we have to be pushed through. Like I'm just give you example is not relevant, like Telstra towers, the community don't want, around the community don't want the towers there, but we have to put it there. So this is hard for us to, as a councillor, to make a communication and connection with the community, because if we don't listen to them properly, what they want actually, because we're here for a community, for their interest. So I'm request to all councillors, please have to add on the Bennett Spring parks, which one is the office looked at is sufficient, and which one's the office recommended. I don't know which park, the park name, maybe I'm wrong if I'm give the wrong names. So please, I request to all councillors support this motions and add on Bennett Spring on these motions, please. If they're gonna be install the water fountains, that should be in the Bennett Spring as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, speaker against. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I believe staff would know that Bennett Springs is part of the city. Balladura, Ellenbrook, Caversham, Aveley, Herne Hill, Kiara, Coongamaya, and continuing. Staff also understand that they are all part of the city of Swan. Mr. Mayor, this report was provided to councillors quite some time ago. There was some concerns on there. Staff went back and investigated, looked at those, and councillors were invited to comment. One councillor did. So to add 2 parks on now that we don't know where they are, we don't know how big they are, we don't know what priority are, I can't believe that this is how we actually spend ratepayers' funds. Let's pluck 2 out. Pluck 2 out because we think we should have some in Bennett Springs. Let me tell you, councillors, you may be elected to your ward, but the Local Government Act says you make decisions for the best of the district.
Sorry, Councillor.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councillor Catalano?
Actually, to begin with, it's not being plucked out of air. It's not something that I want. It's not something I want because I'm a councillor
What's
for
your
that
point?
ward.
What's your point of order?
What I'm saying is all of those statements are incorrect, and I would like to Councillor Bowman to acknowledge that it wasn't actually my request, it was actually the community's request.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Catalano. I rule you have no point of order. Thank you. Please continue, Councillor Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, we just adopted a budget. Every time we spend more, where does the money come from? It comes from rates. Mr. Mayor, when we look at the city expenditure, should we be going, we need a bit for my suburb, we need a bit for my suburb, we need a bit for my ward? Or do we look at the priorities as a whole?
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
The point of order is it's not about what we should have for my ward or for your ward or for anyone else's ward. I make a lot of decisions in here for any other ward.
Sorry, Councillor Catalano, the reason you raise a point of order is to say something that Councillor Bowman has perhaps misled or said something.
He has misled.
Well,
because what he's saying is, what he's misleading this debate about is the fact that it is my preference, when in fact it is not my preference.
Thank you.
It is the community's preference.
I've previously
it's
ruled
misleading.
you have no point of order. Thank you. Please continue, Councillor Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, staff have done this report twice. Councillors had the opportunity to add those extra parks in, question any parks that were taken out. They've ranked them in priority order. That priority order goes from 1 to 6. Nowhere do I see on this list or the previous list a priority for 2 parks unnamed in Bennett Springs. That's why I can't support this alternative.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against. For or against, Councillor Johnson?
For.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Look, councillors, I'm, like other councillors, getting a bit surprised by this. It says in the report that the cost of a water fountain is approximately $13,200, and it's just 2 extra water fountains for the community in Bennett Springs who specifically asked for it in the annual meeting of electors. So given we've got a budget of, what is it, in the region of $200 million, I'm pretty sure we can afford 2 extra water fountains. $13,000 or $26,400, which would be the total cost of supply, is something that could be accommodated through a budget variation if it happened this year, or if it is going to be happening in the next financial year. Well, it's just something we're going to add on to the budget. I don't see any problems with it at all. Long-term financial plan, it's great to add that in there, but every year we set the budget and there's no reason why we can't put an extra $26,000 in there to supply water fountains that were specifically requested and led to this entire article being on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Henderson.
Quickly, councillors, this isn't about picking winners for a particular ward. Have a look at the list. Look at the priorities. Someone's actually sat down and worked it out. The fact of the matter is that the priorities clearly are higher elsewhere than Bennett Springs. Sure, some people in Bennett Springs may have raised it, but we're here to work for everyone in the city of Swan. I cannot possibly understand how it is we can add 2 more into Bennett Springs when we could add 2 more in my ward or someone else's ward or whatever because it's an election year or whatever. Thank you.
Any other speakers for or against? You've spoken, Councillor Singh. I'll ask again, are there any other speakers for or against? Then I'll hand the chair to the Deputy Mayor as I end the debate. And I'm supporting the amendment, and I take on board both sides of the arguments. It was raised by a Bennett Springs group, and being familiar with a number of these parks across the whole of the city, I don't know why Bennett Springs Reserve, Fairy Wren Park, Fountain Park, Babbler Park, Elstona Park, all in Bennett Springs actually didn't get onto the priority list because they're far more used than a number of others on the categories that you've find before you with the water priorities. So I'm supporting it because I think the staff should go back and add 2 more to the list once they've done their priority. It could be towards the end of the third or the fourth year. They might not be at the top like Moulton and Charlotte's Vineyard, but I certainly see their scope. It's not going to break the budget, and I think it's fair retribution for the community group of Bennett Springs who brought this to our attention in the first place, that they deserve at least 2 parks in their community, because out of the, 40 names there, not one was mentioned in Bennett Springs. I can tell you, I've been driving around Bennett Springs since it was created. It used to be called Beachborough for the last 20 years, and I think that they could have a water fountain for people using the parks and their dogs. So I'm supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Question?
Question, Mr. Mayor.
What's your question? Thanks, Councillor Parry.
Question is, did any councillor, any Altoone ward councillor ask this on their wish list last year?
I don't think they did because it came up at the electors' meeting.
Question,
Even though it was a year ago.
Yes, it was. Well, in fact, I think the electors' meeting was it earlier this year? Question, Councillor Henderson.
Is there accessible water where a fountain might be placed for these proposed parks? And will it cost that much money for these parks or more?
Well, that's for the staff to come back if the amendment is accepted. Well, I dare say there'll be some because we actually have running toilets on some of the parks I mentioned. Yes. I've spoken, so now, Councillor Catalano, you'll write a reply. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, you know, it's not about me and what I prefer or whether it's an election year, because I'm not even up for election. So the thing is that this is purely about what people wanted, and I want to give them a fair go. And I also want them to feel that they're actually heard by this council. They've made the effort to come out of their way and let us know what they wanted. And one of those things was the water fountains. And they were motivated to do it, unlike people in the other suburbs who are actually higher on the priority list. They weren't motivated to let us know that they wanted water fountains.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. That's
Yes.
a factually incorrect statement. If you look at the local area plan in Balladura, for example, the number of times where people do comment on water fountains in parks.
Thank you, and I'll ask Councillor Catalano, the reason for the right of reply is to rebut debate against your debate in the first instance. So if you
Well,
could-
that did come up. But the thing
Thank
is
you.
that they were motivated enough to come to the electors' meeting. And, you know, that is their request. It has actually nothing to do with me and my personal preferences. This is about what the community want. And I agree. Why does it have to go on the councillor's wish list for that ward when the electors have already asked you? They've asked all of us. I don't need to ask again. And I think their request is as powerful as anything that I can give. And that's what I'd like to emphasise here today as well. So please support the 2 extra fountains. It's not going to break the bank, but it is going to allow that community to feel that they've been heard and that they also will have the benefit of some drinking fountains so they can use their parks more in the summer, and their dogs can use their parks. And as Councillor Lucas said, those parks are very well used.
Thank you. I'm now putting the amendment, councillors, which is to endorse the installation of drinking water fountains at 2 parks to be identified in Bennett Springs. Those in favour? I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson and Councillor McCulloch, which I make 13. Those against were Councillor Bowman and Councillor Parry. The amendment is passed and becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll now ask, is there anyone against the substantive motion? You wish to debate it?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Councillor Bowman, it's your motion. Please start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, and before people start looking at their meeting procedure local laws, I'm going to talk against my motion. Because, Mr. Mayor, why should I be prudent on the City of Swan ratepayers' funds by taking out 12 parks that were going to get water fountains in my ward, in Pearce Ward? I'm doing a disservice to my residents who vote for me. I'm doing a disservice to the people who live near me. Mr. Mayor, I'm against my motion now because obviously prudent financial management is not a consideration for some people. Mr. Mayor, when we can add parks that haven't been identified, when we
Point
can
of
add...
order. Point of order.
What's your point of order? So I've got to deal with the point of order first.
Council's made a decision and Councillor Bowman's now speaking against a decision of council and he's imputing that
He-
we have made a poor financial decision.
We have not made a decision on this item. We've made a
We
decision
have
on
about the amendment.
We have made a decision on the amendment. It
That's what he's
becomes part-
talking against,
No, he's talking about the entire motion now.
including that amendment.
Yes, and he's entitled to talk
It's
negatively
an
about
adverse
it if he
reflection
doesn't.
on this council and a decision that we've just made.
No, sorry, Councillor Prodovnik, I rule you have no point of order. You had a question, Councillor Catalano?
I'm in the middle of debate, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
I realise that.
Well, my question is, how can, this is actually now speaking against the motion, so we need to have a speaker for the motion.
That's Councillor Councillor Bowman moved the motion. He is entitled to speak first, and he's doing so. So please, unless you have a valid point of order, please don't interrupt. You have 2 minutes and 10 seconds left, Councillor Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, the intent of this motion was to be prudent on financials. It was to be prudent on ratepayers' funds. It was prudent to ensure that priority 1 to 4 get installed first, and then review the usage and see then about priority 5 and 6s. I'm against this motion now, Mr. Mayor, because why should my ward miss out? Why should I cut 12 of the 28, 27 from the officer's recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you. As the seconder, Councillor Henderson.
I seconded this because I felt it was financially prudent and a good start towards the project. And I think this is the key, is that we should be looking at things that are achievable. We should be looking at the cost of those things. And then when we see additions added to it, the cost goes up. You know, where does it stop? We've had that debate just recently. So I struggle to understand why we have gone beyond this motion. But I do think that we do have to make a start, and hence I supported the last amendment, and I think that we do need to continue with this, albeit that some are going to be a little bit higher in priority than others, but hopefully we can progress this and roll it out and make provision for our community because they've asked for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion.
I love election time. It makes me feel so happy on the inside. Let's look at what we just done. So basically we've got Averley, Baskerville, Bellows, Brabham, Brigadoon, Bullsbrook, Bushmead, Caligabarty, Dayton, Gidgee Gannup, Guildford, Hazelmere, Henley Brook, Jane Brook, Herne Hill, Kiara, all not on that list. We should add 2 to every single one as well. That makes perfect sense. And why not? We should just reduce the load as well. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, about 20 parks from 1 to 4. Just get rid of them now too, why don't we? We all look like hypocrites now, don't we, councillors? All you've just done is add 2
Point of order. Point of order. It's,
Thank
you're
you.
going too far.
If you can keep your comments respectful, Councillor.
I just find it hilarious, that's all.
Well-
like, you had 1, then the next motion, you're taking away another 20. It's just funny to me,
None have
that's
been
all.
taken away.
Well, if this passes, you got 1, 2, 3. If you got 1, 2, 3, 4,
Read the
5,
motion,
6.
Councillor.
Yeah.
Read the motion, Councillor Parry.
Endorsing of priority 1, and then priority 6 can be reconsidered in the future, which means that it won't be part of the long-term financial planning, if you read that one. So therefore, I am right in regards to this. Am I right or am I wrong?
I disagree with you.
Well,
but
you may
that's-
disagree,
that's
but
your
the facts are
debate.
the facts, so that's what
Continue.
they are. So therefore, what you're doing right now is you're adding 2 and taking away 20, which is and it's unbelievable that you've just voted that. So I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for or against? Councillor Congdon first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You okay, Councillor Parry?
Oh, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Please continue, Councillor Congdon.
It's pretty hard, Mr Mayor, when I've got a giggling Gertie on the right-hand side of me.
It is funny.
Mr Mayor, councillors, to add another $26,000 to this recommendation of Councillor Bowman's really won't break the Bank of Monte Carlo. I've sat in this chamber over 20 years and listened to people add 20,000s, 50,000s. As a matter of fact, one particular time, Councillor Bowman, you wanted to add 200,000 on an item to do with a church that's not too far away from here. Unbudgeted, unannounced, and 200,000. Lucky enough, it didn't get up, but that's what you did. So when we're talking about this really insignificant amount, I think the city can easily find this money within its planned operation works. So we should be looking at adding this, and we should be looking at resolving to adopt the very resolution, Councillor Bowman, that you put forward. And if you wish to vote against it, that's your prerogative, that's your right. It doesn't mean to say the rest of us need to vote against it and move it forward and get it carried. So that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion? Speaker for the motion? Councillor Catalano is next.
Thank you. Yes, look, I just don't understand why you would deny the communities that are listed, 1, 2, 3, 4 priority parks, water fountains, just because 2 water fountains have been added from Bennett Springs for Bennett Springs parks. I mean, it's absurd. Why would you do that? It's actually going to benefit the amenity of our communities across the board. That's what they pay their rates for. It's going to help them get out of the house. It's going to help them recreate. I mean, I don't know why it has to be all or nothing. What we've got is we've got a program to put water fountains in parks for people and animals. That's fantastic. Now we've got a motion where we've got that and a couple of other extra water fountains in 2 parks in Bennett Springs, purely because those people were motivated enough to come to the electors' meeting and tell us that is what they wanted. I have not heard any other communities come to electors' meetings and tell me that's what they wanted. That they wanted drinking fountains in their park. Because otherwise, I'd be thinking to myself, do you know what? Why don't we put them on the list as well? Because they deserve it. They deserve to be heard. And I so object to this, the comments made about election time and that somebody's just doing it for election purposes and that someone's going to be... I have to remind you, I am actually not up for election, okay? So this is actually about our communities, which is really what the focus is supposed to be about. So why would you deny our communities
You have 1 minute
water
left, thank you.
fountains?
Point of order,
and-
Mr Mayor. The officer's recommendation does not do that.
We're not talking about the officer's recommendation. We're
Yes,
talking
but she's
about...
saying we deny it. I'm not saying that at all.
No,
The officer's
why
recommendation-
would we
Sorry,
now...
councillors, you have no point of order, Councillor Parry. Please continue.
Let me put
Councillor
it another way.
Catalano,
Why
you have
would
50
we...
seconds left.
Thank you. Why would we not agree to support this motion now just because it's got 2 extra water fountains for Bennett Springs? That's absurd. We must, for the benefit of all of the ratepayers who are going to benefit from these water fountains across the city of Swan. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Johnson, you want to speak for the motion?
Yes, for the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
I am surprised that this debate is going on at such intensity. As I look at this, I'm seeing an officer's recommendation for $600,000 over, I believe it is 6 years, versus Councillor Bowman's motion for $240,000 over, 3 years. This is money being placed on the long-term financial plan. We're not actually committing ourselves to spending this money. It's really providing an indication, although the water fountain priority list does indicate we are going to go ahead and do this. Councillor Catalano's amendment, which we've agreed to, adds $26,400 to the long-term financial plan, which means that the total commitment in the long-term financial plan, I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm boring everybody to death here, is $266,400, which is still a lot less than $600,000. It's what is that? $330,000 less. So I don't understand why it's so intense. It's just to me, it's just common sense. We've got a motion to reduce the amount of money in the long-term financial plan. We've increased the spend by 10%. What's the problem? And it was the people in Bennett Springs that wanted this. So let's just get on with it.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? No other speakers. Councillor Bowman, you're right to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, perhaps councillors should look at the motion in front of them. Why should we deny? I agree. Why should we deny Cassowary Park, Kakadu Park, Stradboat Park, Badminton Park, Similar Place Park, Windermere Park, Farewell Park, Clary Small Park, Narran Park, Forest Park, Sharman Park, Wangalla Place, Public Open Space, Lowry Park, Alcala Park, Mornington Park, Tresidder Park, Brumby Park, Brook Park, Willaroo Park, Grandis Park, Paulette Park, Rossini Park, Penasta Park, Uluru Park, Barbarossa Park, Lake Close Park South and Denton Park, because this is what this motion in front of you is doing. It is denying those residents, those people, a water fountain. That's why I cannot support this motion in front of us, because we are denying parks. We are denying these parks water fountains. And the only thing I heard in the motion that I can actually go against is why should we deny? I agree. Why should we deny it? So if you don't want to deny, don't vote for this motion.
I was going to call a point of order on you, Councillor Bowman, but I decided not to, because it was actually your motion. If you're saying deleted those.
I believe we've closed debate, and I was just pointing out.
Yes, it's been a strange and interesting evening. I'm now going to put your motion, which I'll read, that the council resolve to endorse.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, you can't do that. You already understand it. You can't reread again to suit your own suit.
I'm going to read it to make sure, because I think some councillors are being confused. So the council resolve to endorse the installation of water fountains at priority 1, 2, 3 and 4 identified parks. 2, endorse the installation of drinking fountain parks at 2 parks to be identified in Bennett Springs. 3, include a budget allocation on the draft long-term financial plan of $80,000 for 3 years commencing 24-25, and this is Councillor Bowman's motion. 4, city funds should be directed to the highest priority locations, and priority 5 and 6 parks can be reconsidered in the future. They are the parks he said were deleted, and they're not. So I'm now going to put the motion as amended. Those in favour? I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson, Councillor McCulloch. I make that 13. Those against were Councillor Bowman and Councillor Parry. Thank you. Item 6.2 was dealt with in Part A. Item 6.3, sale of land, rates and charges outstanding for more than 3 years. Councillor Prodovnik.
Okay, this is a procedural motion. So in accordance with Part 7(1)(b) of the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019, that the meeting proceed to the next business.
Thank you. You're seconding that, Councillor Knight. Is there anyone against? You can ask a question, Councillor Bowman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Since we haven't provided any information of why previous to the meeting, can I ask staff, do they support this procedural motion? Obviously, there's more information that needs to be followed up or something like that.
Thank you. Acting CEO.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the officers feel that deferring this item will enable the consideration of the sale of these properties in the future against a criteria that will be considered by future council as part of the revision of the hardship policy.
Question.
Councillor
Does that
Henderson?
mean this won't come to the next meeting and might come to a future meeting?
Yes, I think it's listed for a briefing session in November, and then the council would have to adopt the new policy, hardship policy, and then they'll be dealt with. So I have a mover, I have a seconder. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried, that this item is not dealt with this evening. That takes us to item 7.1, change of date, special council meeting after election. It's on page 154. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I move that the council resolves to 1, reschedule the special council meeting from Monday the 23rd of October to Tuesday the 24th of October at 6 p.m. 2, add in second recommendation, which is if the vote count is not completed by close of business Monday the 23rd of October, that the special council meeting be rescheduled from Tuesday the 24th of October 2023 to Thursday the 26th of October 2023 at 6 p.m. And 3, record the reasons for change is there is a record number of nominations for council in 2023 local government elections for the City of Swan. This, in addition to the added time required to count optional preferential votes, could result in the vote not being completed in time to hold the special council meeting on Tuesday the 24th of October. This amendment enables council to have a second date endorsed should this situation arise. An alternative date of Thursday the 26th of October is recommended to ensure all positions have been declared and allow sufficient time for councillors-elect to read their agenda.
Seconded, Councillor Congdon. I'll ask, is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously. Well, can I read it out? Item 7.2, change the Consolidated Amendment Local Law, in brackets 2, 2023. And the reason this has been withdrawn, it requires an absolute majority. It's been moved by Councillor Congdon, seconded by Councillor Parry. I ask, is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Which takes us to 7.3, review of committees of council and advisory groups. And it's also been moved by Councillor Congdon, seconded Councillor Parry. And once again, an absolute majority is required, and that's the reason it's before us. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously. That takes us to part C, item 1, motions of which previous notice has been given. There is nil. 2, notice of motions for consideration of the following meeting given during this meeting. And if there's any councillors intending to submit a notice of motion, please note the deadline for the submission is 5 p.m. Monday the 18th of September. And I believe if you're a candidate and in the provisions of the caretaker provisions, you're not allowed to move a notice of motion. Those councillors who are not under those provisions can.
I wish to move 2, Mr Mayor.
Sorry?
I want to move 2 next month, 2 motions, if that's okay. One to increase the speed limit of Hepburn and and advocacy.
We'll get them
for
in
East
by
Metro.
5 p.m. Monday the 18th of September, and they'll be dealt with at the next meeting. That concludes the business on the agenda tonight, councillors. I thank everyone for their attendance, staff, and close the meeting at 8:51 p.m. Thank you.